Hey, good afternoon, Grace Church. I want to welcome you to Friday at 5, and just really thankful for those of you who will be able to join us today. So I'm gonna, while you've got some time to jump online here, I'm gonna give you some reminders. And the first one of those is that on Sunday there is going to be communion. We're going to take communion together. So we're doing that virtually. And so I wanted to make sure that you knew to gather up some items for communion on Sunday. Whatever you have around the house will be just fine, whether it's crackers or cookies or bread of any sort, whatever works for you, and something to drink, whatever works for you. But to gather that up so that it is ready to go for communion. We will be doing that later on in the service on Sunday, but just so that you know that ahead of time. And then we're going to do something fun. I'm going to put a post up on Facebook on our church page that will be a reminder to you to take a picture and share that so that we can kind of share with each other what our worship is like, our worship at home experience is like with one another, and kind of share that as a church family. So I think that'll be kind of fun. So the next thing that I wanted to say about Sunday is just that you can meet us we'll be starting about 9:45, just depends on how everything's going at the church, but we'll try to start around 9:45 with some music. So we definitely want to give you a chance to sing along with us if you're able to do that. And we will just invite you to turn up the sound and sing out nice and loud, and just raise our voices to the Lord together. All over. If you think about how our Grace Church family is just spread out all over in a 4-county region, and so I just think it's awesome that we are doing that. And then it makes you think of, in this setting, we look at our the whole world map behind us, and you just think about how all around the world that people are praising the Lord and gathering together, all in their homes, all in different kind of gatherings, all in different ways. But God will be praised. Even the rocks will cry out, right? So we are going to praise Him, and we're going to do it by whatever means that we can. So the next thing is to share. There's a Facebook invitation for the service on Sunday, so I just really encourage you to share that with your friends and family, just like you would be inviting them to church to walk into a building. I would invite you to share and invite them to join us live on Facebook at then the rest of the service will start about a few minutes after 10, something like that. And then the last thing is just invite you to pray for God to work through to reach into people's lives. God is not held back by our inability to meet together in one room. He can work, and He does continue to work. So just keep praying for lives to change, for people to come to faith and saving knowledge of Christ, and for their lives to be turned around. So that's what we really want to happen. So I'm going to review these so that you all get this. So I want you to remember to get your things together for communion, okay? Then secondly, be ready to take a little picture. It doesn't matter whether you're in your jammies or whatever. Take a picture of your family so we can see your at-home worship. And there'll be a place on Facebook. You will see it. There'll be a place on Facebook to post that. If you do that, that would be just so fun. Number 3, you're going to meet together with us if you'd like to at 9:45 to sing together. Number 4 is to share the invitation and invite people to join us with the service. And number 5 is to pray. Okay? So with all of that, I'm going to turn it over to Pastor Don, and I will let him talk to you about what he is. I don't know what he's going to talk about. We're going to find out. We're going to find out. Here we go.
I think we're good. So, Lisa, I hope you can remind the people of those 5 things at the end of this, because we'll probably have some people joining. Okay. So anyway, how you guys doing today? Again, new coffee cup today. It says, "It is well with my soul." Can you see that?
That's Teresa McDonald's.
Oh, it's Teresa McDonald's cup. Okay, Teresa, if you're watching, I own your cup now, and it will require Snickers bar to get it back. It comes from a psalm, but also a song that many people sing in their churches during this season. Is it well in your soul, or is it is well in my soul? Depends on how you want to say it. It's a question or a statement of faith. So hope you're doing well. Life here has settled down some. Been through a lot of stress here. The girls have done a marvelous job keeping you all in shape in terms of what's going on, in terms of maintaining the work of the ministry, helping me catch up to understand things in terms of technology. So I'm really happy that they're here, and you guys should be really proud of our entire staff. We'll throw Ryan into that mix too. So our current series in the month of April is called Taking a Closer Look. In other words, we're doing a double take. It's like looking at something and then turning and looking at it again. You need to take in additional facts, see something in a different light. And we're looking at 4 places, 4 objects really, events that are associated with the life and the ministry of Christ during the very end of his life and ministry. So last week we looked at the Garden of Gethsemane. And what we're going to do each week during this series is when I speak on a topic on Sunday, like the garden, then on Wednesday at 1, I'm going to look at one of the individuals associated with that event and take a closer look at that individual and point some things out. So this past Wednesday, we looked at a naked guy in Mark chapter 14. On Fridays of that week, we're always going to take a look at the life of Jesus and try to get a different perspective on the life of Christ than the typical stories that you and I have grown up with. We're just going to, it's like having a magnifying glass and looking at things closer. So we're in the garden as we dealt with on Sunday, and I want us to look at the life of Christ. When you look at the passages dealing with the Garden of Gethsemane, there's quite a bunch of scripture. In all 4 Gospels, each Gospel presents some different facet to the story. So it's kind of like having 4 different accounts of, say, a car accident. One person would say, well, a blue car hit a red truck. Another person might say a Chevy hit a Ford, etc. When you look at all 4 Gospel accounts and you harmonize and put them together, you get the complete story. So what I'm going to do today is look at leadership lessons from the garden. Leadership lessons from the garden. As I look through these chapters, which would be Matthew 26, Mark 14, Luke 22, and John 18, there's a number of things that stood out to me, things that I had, probably have seen before, have forgotten, other things just through prayer and through study, I was able to glean some new insights. But there are 4 things that stood out to me, and we're only going to deal with one of them today, but let me give you all 4 of these. When you look at the life of Jesus as a leader, and remember, the garden is happening at the very end of 3.5 years of his ministry. So we're really, what we see is a summation of the way that Jesus led his disciples. It's looking at the life of a great leader and seeing how a simple carpenter was able to impact a group of people who changed their world. Jesus is the most important historical figure in history. Well over 1 billion, 2 billion people follow Christ and call him Lord. So as we think about the life of Christ, here's a man that, as far as we know, had no academic high state of learning like in a university. He never wrote a book. He only traveled at best 100 miles from his own home that we know of, and yet he's the most talked about person in human history. More books have been written on Jesus and his movement than any other single individual. So as we look at leadership lessons, we can learn a lot from the garden. The garden is a hotbed for leadership. Now, we think of the Garden of Gethsemane in many other ways, but we see the summation of all that Jesus did, all that he said here in this short period of time in this simple garden. So without rehashing Sunday's message, here are 4 observations that I've had on the life of Jesus as he led in the garden. Number 1, he led decisively. He led decisively. He was very exact. He was on point in what he was doing. He knew what had to be done, and he took positive steps towards his desired goal. He influenced others, and he didn't just, as a leader, do things and expect people to jump through hoops to make him happy. He was modeling to all of his disciples that the fact that they would have to lead someday, and that they would need to lead in a decisive manner. You and I lead people. You may not have a position as a leader, but we all influence somebody. And when you boil it down, leadership is nothing more than influence. You influence your children, you influence neighbors, you influence family members, co-workers. We all have a spot of leadership. And what we can learn from Jesus here in the garden is he led decisively. Second thing we see is he helped immediately. Remember the dude that got his ear chopped off? We talked about that on Wednesday. Jesus immediately responded to help this man. Now, Jesus had his own issues, had his own problems, had his own concerns. So often you and I, when we're going through tough times, we're worried about us. And somebody else can be struggling and we just look the other way. We don't even see them sometimes. All of us, if you drive, have probably driven by somebody alongside the road. Their car's broken down. They've hit a deer. They've run out of gas. Do you always stop to help them? Probably not if you're normal. Jesus responded immediately. He is going to lose his life in a matter of hours, but yet he sees somebody in need and he helps immediately. If you remember, one of my talks was about the idea of hope, and it's helping other people every day. Helping other people every day. We used an acronym. That's what Jesus did. He saw a need, he met a need. He didn't wait for the church, he didn't wait for the government, he didn't wait for somebody else. He responded. And if you and I are going to be more like Jesus and be a leader like Jesus, we have to respond with positive steps and in a timely manner. Third thing that Jesus did is he stood courageously. The mark of all the great leaders in history are people who have stood up to injustice and evil, who have stood for the good in humanity, who have stood to defend the helpless. They've stood up and made their voice known, whether it was politically correct or not. They stood up to the powers that would suppress them and hurt others. So if we're going to be a good leader, we have to stand courageously. And anytime you do that, it's going to cost you something. Okay? Standing against a majority of people who are wrong, who are ethically wrong, morally wrong, in many cases, biblically wrong. To stand against them can be tough. It can cost you something. But do you want to be like Jesus, or do you want to be like everybody else? I mean, that's a decision you have to make. He led decisively. He helped immediately. He stood courageously, and he loved deeply. When you look at the garden story, Jesus was betrayed by one of his close friends, a man that had been with him at least 3 years, a guy by the name of Judas, who I've talked about before. Judas came up and kissed Jesus. Now, it wasn't a face-to-face kiss. You just didn't do that in that culture. He kissed him on the cheek. He embraced him. If you've ever seen a movie with people from France, you know exactly what I'm talking about. It was a way of greeting people. And he did that to identify Jesus to all of the soldiers and the religious leaders that were there to arrest him, because it was at night. So he arranged that signal. He was betrayed by a kiss from one of his best friends. But Jesus still loved him anyway. Still loved him anyway. He believed in him to the very end. Now, you and I will be betrayed at times, okay? And the question is do we take that personally? Do we hold it against somebody? Or do we still have God's love in our heart for that person, believing the best, hoping for the best, even if they prove themselves wrong? Jesus loved deeply. Have you got those 4 things? I'll go through them again. He led decisively. He helped immediately. He stood courageously when they came to arrest him. And he loved deeply. 4 great qualities of a leader. But today, I just want to breeze through the first one, that Jesus was a leader and he led decisively. And I want to just give you some attributes from from the garden experience, if you will, that will help you to understand maybe a little bit clearer how we can lead like Jesus. Anybody can sit down, anybody can walk away, but to follow requires some heart. But to lead requires both mental and emotional capacities that are greater than other people. Anybody can follow, anybody can lay down, anybody can quit. To be a leader requires some unique traits. So let me share with you some of my insights. And if you've got your Bible, you can go back and forth. If you've got an electronic version, good luck. I'll try to go slow so you can get these, but you could at least write them down. One of the traits that we see in Jesus that made him a decisive leader is that he directed. You could write the word directed. In Luke 22, verse 39 and verse 40, it says, Jesus went out as usual, we talked about that before, to the Mount of Olives, and his disciples followed him. Catch that. Out of the 4 gospel accounts, that's the only one that says they followed him. Other gospel accounts said they went with him. This particularly says they followed him, which is a Jewish concept of being in step behind a rabbi, recognizing a leader, allowing the leader to guide you, to take you where he wants you to go. And it says, on reaching the place, which would be the Garden of Gethsemane, he said to them, now, he directed them in the sense that he guided them. He knew where he wanted them to go. They didn't have a clue. The mark of a good leader is he knows where he wants his people to be. All they have to do is have the heart to follow the leader. That's one of the lonely places of a leader, is to be in front. Because when you're in front, you don't know what's being said behind you. You don't know if they're close to you or strung out, playing kick the can or some game like that. And you're the one that's going to take the bullet or the arrow first, not them. You are. Being a leader is tough, but you have to be willing to direct them, which means you have to know where you're going. You have to have a plan. You have to be willing to lead. And leaders know they're leaders because they have people who follow them. One of the things I love about my staff here at the church is that they are good followers, and as a result of that, they have become good leaders. A position doesn't make you a leader. Having influence in people's life does. One of the things that I will most appreciate if the day comes when I leave this church, either by death or by rapture, I don't plan on moving anywhere, is one of the greatest blessing of my life will be the staff that I've had here. Because they have not only followed me, not only are they loyal to me, each of them have cultivated and learned that skill, and now each of them lead in their own way. So, what does it mean to be a person who leads decisively? You have to be directive. Jesus directed people. Didn't mean that he pointed his finger and told people what to do. Not at all. But he knew where he was going, and because they had confidence in that, they followed him. Here's the second thing. If you want to write down Mark chapter 14, verse 32 and verse 34. Jesus not only directed, he instructed. You do have to teach people if you're a leader. If you have people following you, you have to give them the right amount of information, and you have to be clear, you have to be concise, and you have to be simple. You can't beat around the bush. And you have to help people understand exactly what it is that you're talking about and what you mean. And that may mean you have to repeat yourself, and sometimes you have to clarify yourself using other language, other word pictures. But if we don't give people instructions, then we are to blame as leaders. If you don't properly tell your kids what you expect of them, then that's on you. If you're trying to influence somebody for Christ, and you just say something like, well, you ought to go to church, or, oh, you ought to read your Bible. That's not that helpful to a person. They need Jesus, not church, not owning a Bible. You need to cut to the chase and be simple in what you say. Give clear-cut instructions. in Mark 14, verse 32, they went to a place called Gethsemane. And Jesus said to his disciples, watch this, sit here while I pray. You can't get much simpler than that. It's one of the things I love about being a Christian. The book's not hard to understand. I can understand the concept of sit here. My mother used to tell me that. My principal used to tell me that. My wife used to tell me that. Okay? You have to give clear-cut instructions. Don't make them overly complicated. The Christian faith is just an easy process if you keep it simple. And actually, hear me on this, being a parent can be quite simple. If you give clear expectations to your children so that they know exactly what you mean and what's expected of them, when it is expected, and how to do it, being a parent can really be fun, as being a pastor can be too, or a home group leader, or a Sunday school teacher, whatever. Jesus instructed. Here's a third element of being a decisive leader. Jesus modeled. So what do we know about Jesus? He directed, Jesus instructed, but he also modeled. If you go to John chapter 18 and verse 1, it says this. I love this passage. This is what captured me and made me want to speak on the subject today. It says, when he had finished praying in John 18:1, now remember, he is still up at the top of the city, having the Lord's Supper. We would call it the supper, the Passover meal. He's now walking down from the city. When he's done praying there, on his way to Gethsemane, watch this. When he had finished praying, Jesus left with his disciples. And I love this phrase. He crossed the Kidron Valley. From the city of Jerusalem to the Mount of Olives was a huge V-cut valley called the Kidron Valley, or the Valley of Jehoshaphat. The Jewish people believe that is where the Last Judgment will take place. It was maybe 70, 80 feet deep. Jesus had to go through that and work his way up the hill to the Mount of Olives, to the Garden of Gethsemane. Okay, so he crossed the Kidron Valley. He showed them again, because this was his usual place to go, how to traverse downward and how to go upward. Now you say that's a simple thing. Most of the reason people fail in life is not because somebody didn't tell them what to do. No one ever took the time to show them what they were to do and how to do it. It says that he had prayed. He had shown them how to pray. He showed them how to traverse this valley, because remember, all of them, except one, was from the northern region. Jesus was somebody who had come here regularly. So he knew the shortcuts, okay? To make life easy as a leader, you have to be out front and model to people, not just tell them what to do, but how to do something. It goes on, it says he crossed the Kidron Valley, and I love this phrase, on the other side. Remember, we talked about going from here to, say it, here to there. We have to model that process. We have to show people what we want them to do, not just tell them. More is caught than, the word taught. More is caught than is taught. He showed them how to cross the valley, how to get to the other side. And then it goes on. On the other side, there was an olive grove, and he and his disciples went into it. Now, it doesn't tell us that the disciples always went here to pray. It tells us that Jesus went here to pray. He knows that down the road, they're going to have to learn how to pray, because they're going to be facing tough situations too. So he shows them the Garden of Gethsemane, his private spot, his sweet spot. He shows them how to get in there. Have you ever, well, let me say this. A couple years ago, I went with my good friend Steve Hudson to Israel. One day we wandered all around Jerusalem, and Steve had a favorite spot, but it was blocked off. The normal traffic, the normal crowd could not get into the spot. Yeah, it's a very famous spot. I won't tell you what it was, but Steve showed me his sweet spot. He showed me his shortcut. And today I could take you there. Why? Because a friend took the time to model to me how to do it. Now let me ask you, you've got people that look up to you, people you influence. What are you modeling to them? I'm a poor model at times, very poor, as I think you can be at times. Think in terms of how you speak about others. As our children listen to us day in, day out, they hear your words. They see your facial expressions when you talk about not just church, not your pastor, but you talk about life. You talk about people in government. You talk about your boss. You talk about neighbors. What are you modeling to them? And does that reinforce your Christian words and your Christian values? If you're like me, not all the time. We could do a better job modeling and being more positive in the way that we model. So what did Jesus do? He directed, he instructed, he modeled. Number 4, this is so critical. If you're looking in Matthew, if you want to flip over there, Matthew 26, verse 36. I love this verse. And I think we talked about this on Sunday. Or no, I'm talking about it this Sunday, I think. I know, some Sunday. Last week or this week. But it says he included, the idea of included. Matthew 26, 36. Then Jesus went with his disciples. Here's what I like about this verse. It doesn't say this. Then Jesus went with the disciples. See, sometimes one little word makes all the difference. Then Jesus went with his disciples. They were his disciples. They didn't make him their rabbi. He chose them. He included them in his life. And if you look at Matthew, you read that whole passage of Matthew 26 and Mark 14, you see over and over and over that they're his disciples. They're his friends. They're the people that he chose. He included them. Being a leader means you have to be involved in people's lives. Not just give directives. Not just order them around. You have to have an emotional bond with them. You have to care about them. Now, does that mean you have to live with them? Well, it's something Jesus did for about 3 years. But no, in our culture, we don't have the luxury of 24/7 being with the people we influence, co-workers, church mates, etc. But we can include them in our life. We can include them in our conversations. We can include them in our Facebook chats. Are you including people in your life? A leader has to have alone time, but a leader never has the right or the privilege of being alone. They have to include people. And does that mean you're going to get stung sometimes? Yep. Does that mean you're going to be betrayed like Jesus? Answer, yep. Does that mean you're going to be disappointed? Uh-huh. But it also gives you an opportunity to love people, to get to know people, to have friends with people. Jesus directed, Jesus instructed, Jesus modeled, Jesus included. Now, as you look at this, at these 4 passages, number 5 is this: Jesus prayed. In all 4 accounts, Matthew, Mark, Luke, John, we see Jesus praying. The greatest thing you can do as a leader in anybody's life is to pray for them. Not just say you'll pray, but to actually pray for them, to intercede on their behalf, to take them before God, to lift them up, to want something better for their life spiritually than where they currently are. A 6th ingredient: Jesus directed, Jesus instructed, Jesus modeled, Jesus included, Jesus prayed. And we know this from the Garden of Gethsemane. Jesus endured. He endured. It was not easy being betrayed. It was not easy to be roughed up by soldiers and religious leaders. It was not easy to be pushed, shoved, drugged back or down the hill, through the valley, up the valley, into the city of Jerusalem. It was not easy to go through 6 different trials. It was not easy to be beaten. It was not easy to have a crown of thorns. It was not easy to be humiliated. It was not easy to be crucified. All of it unjustly. One of the things I've learned about a leader is this: it's not a matter of having thick skin. It's a matter of taking wounds to your skin, whether it's thick or thin. And you do that because you love people. It doesn't matter if they don't love you. You hang in there. You endure their misunderstanding. You endure their judgments. You endure the pain they would inflict upon you. A, because you love God, and B, you love people. To be a good parent, you have to risk having your children look at you, eye to eye, toe to toe, and say this: I hate you. I think you're the worst father, the worst mother, the worst employee, the worst boss. And still love God, and still love them, and still do your best. That's what it means to be a good leader. You have to endure. Now, for a moment, stop and think about our president. I don't care if you're a Democrat, don't care if you're a Republican or independent. Think about the abuse that comes our president's way. Now, could he keep his mouth shut and his thumb off from the Twitter? Yes. But for a moment, think of the abuse that comes his way. And for some of our justices, some of our Congress people. And now think of people in your life who maybe you have cast words at, who you have talked about. It's not easy being in leadership, but you have to admire somebody that loves his country enough to stay in there, hang in there, and want the best for our nation and our people. A good leader endures. Here's the last thing. And I'm just going to read one verse to you. And in Matthew chapter 26, verse 46, and in Mark 14, verse 42, same words in both passages. A seventh trait of a good leader is somebody who challenges other people. Jesus directed, Jesus instructed, Jesus modeled, Jesus included, Jesus prayed, Jesus endured, and Jesus challenged others. I've mentioned this before. Jesus said, "Rise, let us go." In other words, get off your butt. Get moving. We've got things to do. Rise, let us go. Here comes my betrayer. Jesus challenged them to not quit, to not give up, to not run, to continue, to face opposition. Now, just because you challenge somebody doesn't always mean they're going to respond positively, because we know for a period of time they all ran for their own lives. But a good leader understands that about people. A good leader knows what's in people's hearts and minds, but he challenges them to be better regardless of that. The decision's theirs. If we don't challenge our children, if we don't challenge our home groups, if we don't challenge our fellow employees, if we don't challenge our community and the citizens of our nation to be better than what they're currently living, that's on us. It's on us. Those that have the ability to influence and choose not to, it's on us. Hey, Jesus led decisively. We can be a better leader. You've got 7 different aspects of Jesus's leadership. That's just 7 that I found here. There's a lot more. Be a good leader. Be a good influencer. Make a difference for the kingdom. As we head into Easter, remember, we've heard some government people say, we can't celebrate Easter. Obviously, they've never read the Bible, okay? We have people here in Michigan, I believe it was our governor, who said something to the effect that the Easter Bunny and the Tooth Fairy are essential workers. Now, I hope that I understand what she was saying, but what she didn't say is Jesus is essential. Jesus is essential. He rose from the grave so that you and I could be free, so that you and I could have hope, so that you and I could serve him and tell others. Let's do that this Easter season. Let me pray for you. Father, for our people today that are watching, I pray you would help them to look at these passages, have some new insights into who Jesus was, and in this one aspect of his life. He was a great leader. There's a number of things that he did right, because we're the recipients of all that he taught and all that he did. May we go out of our way to influence somebody the way that Jesus did. And in doing so, we will be living the new life that Jesus provided for us when he came out of that grave. Hey, you guys have a great time as you go into the weekend. Remember, we're having communion on Sunday. Lisa's going to sum up the 5 things that she talked about earlier for anybody that came in late.
Whoops. Okay, there we go. 5 things. Number 1, gather your stuff up for communion on Sunday. We are going to do that toward the end of the service. So gather those things in your home. Whatever works for you will be good enough. Number 2, if you can, take a picture of your worship at home, and there'll be a place on Facebook to share that with the rest of our church family, and that'll be a lot of fun. Number 3, we encourage you to join us around 9:45 to sing if you would like to. Number 4, and make sure and turn your sound nice and loud, and then we can all make a joyful noise together. Number 4 is to share. There's a Facebook invitation for the church on Sunday, doing Facebook Live. And I share that, or create your own invitation to invite other people. But we want you to invite people to the live service just like you would invite them to come in the door. And then number 5, pray. Okay, just continue to pray. And we will look forward to seeing you virtually on Sunday. Okay, have a great weekend.